Before there were cities, kingdoms, or towering monuments, one quiet discovery changed the course of human history forever. It wasn't a great battle or the rise of a powerful empire. It was something far simpler. The moment people learned they could grow their own food. For countless generations, human survival depended entirely on nature. Families moved across forests and open plains, following migrating animals and gathering whatever the land could provide. Life was unpredictable. A successful hunt could feed everyone for days, but a harsh winter, a long drought, or disappearing wildlife could quickly turn survival into a daily struggle. Even so, these early people possessed remarkable knowledge. They understood animal migrations, recognized edible plants, and learned to survive in environments that would challenge most people today. Then the world itself began to change. As the last ice age slowly ended, temperatures rose, glaciers retreated, and landscapes across the planet were transformed. Warmer climates allowed forests to spread and grasslands to flourish. Across Western Asia, nature created ideal conditions for plants and animals to thrive. One region became especially important. Stretching across the Middle East was a fertile arc of land, rich with rivers, wild grain, and abundant wildlife. A place we now call the Fertile Crescent. The people who lived there began gathering wild wheat and barley in greater quantities than ever before. Without realizing it, they were taking the first steps toward a completely new way of life. Some groups stayed in the same place for longer periods, building simple homes and storing food for future seasons. Permanent settlements were beginning to appear. No one could have imagined that these small experiments with seeds and seasons would eventually lead to cities, writing, governments, and civilizations. But humanity's greatest transformation had already begun. The first farmers didn't become experts overnight. They watched nature closely, learning which seeds grew best, when the rains arrived, and how different soils affected each harvest. Every season taught them something new. Instead of simply gathering whatever nature offered, people began choosing the healthiest seeds and planting them again. Without realizing it, they were slowly changing the plants themselves through generations of careful selection. As crops became more dependable, people no longer needed to move constantly in search of food. Their future was now connected to the land they cultivated. Farming wasn't the only breakthrough. Wild animals gradually became trusted companions. Goats and sheep were among the first to live alongside humans, providing reliable food, milk, hides, and wool. Over time, larger animals such as cattle were also domesticated. They provided strength for heavy work and became an essential part of early farming communities. Image prompt. These changes transformed everyday life. Instead of carrying everything they owned from place to place, families invested in permanent homes, storage buildings, and fertile farmland. Children now grew up in stable communities rather than constantly traveling. They inherited homes, traditions, and fields that their families had worked for generations. Reliable harvests meant there was often more food than a family needed immediately. For the first time, communities could store supplies for difficult seasons ahead. As food became more secure, populations slowly increased. Small farming villages expanded into larger settlements, bringing new opportunities and entirely new challenges. Without knowing it, these early farmers had set humanity on a completely different path. Their quiet discoveries would eventually lead to the rise of cities, kingdoms, and the first great civilizations. As villages continued to grow, they needed more than food to survive. People had to organize daily life, settle disagreements, protect harvests, and work together on larger projects that no single family could accomplish alone. Gradually, leadership became more organized. Experienced individuals began guiding communities, coordinating irrigation, protecting food supplies, and helping villages prosper together. For the first time, not everyone needed to spend every day growing food. Reliable harvests allowed some people to develop entirely different skills and professions. Some became expert potters, creating strong clay containers that protected grain from moisture and pests. Others crafted sharper tools that made farming and building more efficient. Builders improved homes using stone, timber, and mud brick. Weavers produced stronger fabrics, while skilled craftspeople created objects that were both practical and beautiful. These specialized skills encouraged innovation. Every new idea made life a little easier and allowed communities to become stronger and more connected. Trade soon expanded beyond neighboring villages. Communities exchanged grain for rare stones, shells, minerals, and materials that could not be found close to home. As trade routes grew longer, they carried much more than goods. New ideas, technologies, traditions, and cultural practices spread from one community to another. One remarkable settlement reveals just how advanced these early communities had become. Around 7,400 BCE, thousands of people lived together in the farming settlement we now call Çatalhöyük. Life inside these early farming communities wasn't always easy. Growing crops demanded constant attention, from preparing the fields to protecting the harvest. Farming brought stability, but it also required more daily work than the old hunting lifestyle. Living in larger settlements also created new problems. As more families shared the same space, diseases spread more easily, and diets became less varied than those of earlier hunter-gatherers. Humanity had solved one challenge, only to discover another. But despite these difficulties, the advantages of farming were impossible to ignore. Surplus food changed everything. Communities could finally prepare for poor harvests instead of living one season at a time, creating a level of security that earlier generations had never known. For the first time in history, wealth could be stored, protected, and passed from one generation to the next. Land itself became one of humanity's most valuable possessions. Families began passing fields, homes, and resources to their children. Over time, differences in wealth slowly appeared as some communities accumulated more land and harvests than others. What looked like scattered farming villages were quietly laying the foundations for something much greater. Their success would eventually give rise to the world's first civilizations. As generations passed, these growing communities became more organized, more connected, and more ambitious than anyone could have imagined. The revolution that began with a handful of carefully planted seeds was no longer just changing how people lived. It was reshaping the future of humanity itself. As villages became larger, another quiet revolution began. Reliable harvests meant that not everyone needed to spend every day farming, opening the door for entirely new professions. Image prompt. Some people became skilled potters, shaping clay into strong storage jars. Others forged tools, carved wood, or built homes, allowing communities to become more efficient than ever before. Merchants appeared alongside craftsmen, exchanging goods between neighboring settlements. Every successful trade brought new materials, fresh ideas, and stronger connections between communities. As knowledge spread, innovation accelerated. Every generation improved the tools, techniques, and skills inherited from those who came before. Soon, these growing settlements became connected by expanding trade routes. Goods traveled farther than ever before, linking distant communities across hundreds of kilometers. Trade carried far more than valuable goods. It also spread technologies, traditions, beliefs, and ideas that shaped cultures across entire regions. One remarkable settlement reveals just how advanced these communities had already become. Around 7,400 BCE, thousands of people lived together in what is now known as Çatalhöyük. Without streets, families moved across rooftops to reach neighboring homes. Inside, colorful wall paintings and carefully arranged living spaces reflected a surprisingly sophisticated society. These settlements were far more than collections of houses. They were living communities where cooperation, tradition, and shared knowledge shaped everyday life. Although the people who lived there could never have imagined the future, their villages were quietly becoming the foundation upon which the first civilizations would eventually rise. Even as these early communities prospered, farming demanded relentless effort. From sunrise until sunset, every season brought new work that could never be ignored. Fields had to be cleared, seeds carefully planted, weeds removed, and crops protected until harvest. Success depended on patience, skill, and cooperation. Unlike their hunter-gatherer ancestors, farmers couldn't simply move on when conditions became difficult. Their future depended on the land they had worked so hard to cultivate. Living in permanent settlements also brought unexpected challenges. Crowded villages made it easier for diseases to spread, while diets became more dependent on a few staple crops. Humanity had solved one problem, but discovered another. Progress often came with sacrifices that early communities could never have predicted. Even so, the benefits of agriculture far outweighed its hardships. Reliable harvests allowed people to prepare for difficult years instead of living from one season to the next. For the first time, wealth could be stored, protected, and inherited. Land became one of the most valuable resources any family could own. As generations passed, families handed down their homes, fields, and knowledge to their children. These traditions created stronger communities and lasting connections to the land. Not every family prospered equally. Some accumulated more land and larger harvests than others, gradually creating differences in wealth and influence within society. What began as scattered farming villages was quietly becoming the foundation of civilization itself. The seeds planted thousands of years ago were about to change the entire course of human history. As farming villages continued to expand, they slowly transformed into organized communities. People no longer lived only for survival. They began building societies with rules, responsibilities, and shared goals that united thousands of individuals. Larger populations required better organization. Community leaders coordinated irrigation projects, protected grain stores, settled disputes, and ensured that everyone worked together during planting and harvest seasons. These responsibilities gradually gave rise to more structured leadership. Decisions were no longer made by individual families alone, but by respected figures responsible for the welfare of the entire community. As societies became more organized, people discovered that cooperation could achieve extraordinary things. Large irrigation systems, storage facilities, and public buildings became possible because entire communities worked toward the same goal. The success of these shared projects encouraged even greater ambitions. Communities grew larger, stronger, and more confident with every passing generation. Reliable food supplies also gave people something they had rarely experienced before: time. With fewer worries about finding their next meal, many could focus on learning new skills and improving old ones. Craftsmanship advanced quickly. Better tools, stronger homes, improved pottery, and more efficient farming methods spread from village to village, making life steadily more productive. Innovation no longer happened in isolation. Every new discovery inspired another, creating a chain of progress that slowly reshaped entire regions. What had started with simple farming was becoming something far more remarkable. Human societies were developing the knowledge and organization needed to build the first true civilizations. Without realizing it, these ordinary farmers were laying the foundations for a future filled with cities, kings, trade networks, written language, and history itself. As these organized communities continued to expand, some settlements grew far beyond anything humanity had seen before. Thousands of people now lived together, sharing resources, skills, and responsibilities that connected every part of daily life. These growing settlements needed better planning. Homes were built closer together, storage areas became larger, and public spaces allowed entire communities to gather for trade, ceremonies, and important decisions. Food was no longer simply consumed after each harvest. Grain could be stored for months or even years, creating reserves that protected entire communities during difficult seasons. With dependable food supplies, populations continued to grow. Children survived in greater numbers, families expanded, and villages gradually became the first true towns. As towns expanded, they became centers of trade. Merchants arrived from distant regions carrying valuable materials that local communities had never seen before. Every trade route carried more than goods. New farming methods, building techniques, artistic traditions, and ideas traveled alongside the merchants who connected distant settlements. Knowledge spread from one generation to the next, allowing every community to build upon earlier discoveries instead of starting over. Progress began moving faster than ever before. The simple act of planting seeds had now transformed nearly every part of human life. Farming shaped where people lived, how they worked, and how entire societies were organized. Without these early farming communities, history would have unfolded very differently. The foundations of civilization were being built quietly, one harvest at a time. The next great leap would reshape humanity even further. As settlements grew into cities, entirely new ideas would emerge. Government, writing, organized religion, and the first civilizations that changed the ancient world forever. As populations continued to grow, Simple villages evolved into bustling cities. Thousands of people now lived within the same settlement, creating communities unlike anything the world had ever seen. Life inside these cities was constantly changing. Markets were filled with merchants, craftsmen worked in busy workshops, and farmers arrived each day carrying fresh harvests from the surrounding countryside. Managing so many people required careful organization. Leaders needed to record harvests, measure land, collect resources, and coordinate public works across growing cities. Memory alone was no longer enough. Communities needed a reliable way to preserve information, communicate across generations, and keep track of an increasingly complex society. That need led to one of humanity's greatest inventions: writing. Simple marks used to record grain and livestock gradually evolved into complete writing systems. For the first time, knowledge could survive long after its creator was gone. Stories, laws, trade records, mathematics, and history itself could now be preserved for future generations. Writing transformed civilization forever. Ideas no longer disappeared with the passing of time. Every generation could learn from those who came before and continue building upon their achievements. As cities expanded, governments became more organized. Laws helped maintain order, while officials managed resources, trade, construction, and public life throughout the growing settlements. Temples also became the heart of many early cities. They were places of worship, education, administration, and storage, playing a central role in the lives of ordinary people. What had started with a single planted seed had now given rise to organized governments, written language, thriving cities, and the first great civilizations. Humanity had entered an entirely new age. The impact of agriculture is impossible to overstate. Nearly every civilization that followed was built upon the reliable food supplies created by the world's first farmers. History's greatest monuments could only exist because stable harvests supported thousands of workers. Without agriculture, these incredible achievements would never have been possible. Farmers produced enough food for entire societies, allowing philosophers, artists, scientists, engineers, and inventors to dedicate their lives to knowledge and innovation. Even today, the influence of that ancient breakthrough surrounds us. Our cities, governments, schools, economies, and global trade all trace their origins back to the decision to cultivate the land. Modern technology may seem far removed from the first fields of wheat and barley, but every step forward rests on the foundation those early communities created thousands of years ago. Historians often debate which event changed human history the most. Some point to writing, the Industrial Revolution, or electricity. Each transformed civilization, but all depended on something that came first. Without agriculture, there would have been no permanent cities, no large populations, no organized governments, and no written records preserving humanity's knowledge. Perhaps the greatest revolution in history happened so quietly that no one living through it realized its true importance. There was no single battle or famous speech, only countless ordinary people planting seeds and building better lives. Their names have been forgotten, but their legacy remains everywhere. Every civilization, every nation, and every modern society stands upon the foundations they built through patience, cooperation, and determination. The simple act of planting a seed transformed wandering hunter-gatherers into builders of cities, creators of culture, and explorers of science. It wasn't just a new way to find food. It was the moment humanity began reshaping the world itself. If you enjoyed this journey through history, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with anyone who loves history.